All right, so here we go. This is an attempt to record um, the lecture as I would have presented it in class to you guys. We've already covered all of this material. However, I felt that it would be necessary for me to refresh your memory on a lot of the material, and then, of course, make special attention or pay special focus on certain items that I think that need to be emphasized for the sake of the quiz that we are preparing for this upcoming Friday. So we're starting off here with a revolution within. This is the first title slide, and I'm just going to run through the slides fairly quickly. You guys know how to read, but I'm going to read through them for the most part, but again, emphasize certain terms that I think will be essential for you to understand and for the sake of the course. And then, of course, have you guys focus on items that I believe that are essential for you to perform well on the quiz this Friday. So we're starting off with, if you recall, at the end of the French and American, actually the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, the colonies had united for the first time in a long time together in an effort to assist the British with their problems with the French. They're successful in this, and the French and Indian War will be significant because it shows the colonies that when united, that they're very strong. And they are also aware of the weaknesses of the British. The British are weak because they're not really familiar with guerrilla warfare, and the colonies are able to recognize this real quick. That's neither here nor there. The war is now over. And now that the war is over, we can go back to normality. And the normal relationship between the colonies and the mother country was this notion of the mercantilist system, that the colonies existed. You're only here to serve the mother country, which means you need to provide us with raw materials, raw goods, so that we can have a better life in England. So the colonies go back to being neglected. The colonies go back to being treated as second-class citizens. And on top of all of that, with all the debt incurred by the French and Indian War, or known as the 7 Years' War, the British feel that the colonies caused all this caused all of the chaos, so they should pay for the majority of the chaos. They begin to levy taxes. They begin to require troops. Um, and the troops are there to protect the colonies. And when I say protect, I'm doing an air quotes while I'm giving this lecture. Protect them in the sense that the troops are really there to watch the colonies, to make sure that the colonies are not engaging in illegal activities, such as moving west of the Appalachian Mountains because they're getting killed by Native American tribes. And the troops are there to halt smuggling because the colonies are beginning to trade amongst each other instead of sending the goods directly to the mother country, because that's what was supposed to happen to satisfy the mercantilist system. Now, moving on to the next slide, we will always hear this conversation about no representation or no taxation without representation, and that's fine, but that really doesn't hold any merit. For this slide in particular, I want us to focus on writs of assistance. So we can see here with writs of assistance, it's right here. And I want you guys to pay attention to that because this is in essence a policy that the British are going to adapt, and it's in essence a search warrant. It's a search warrant for the British officers in the colonies to search person and property of anybody that they believe to be smuggling goods. And again, smuggling goods is just the transfer of goods or the illegal transfer of goods from one place to another. And they're not allowed to do that because everything has to go back to the British to satisfy that system. So with writs of assistance, soldiers are now presented with an impossible situation. They now have to determine, by way of profiling, individuals that they believe to be engaged in these type of illicit activities. And when police start profiling, and all police agencies must profile to some degree. I mean, we're not dumb. We have to make educated guesses. We have to, based on our experience, make assumptions or presumptions all the time. But when the police begin to do it, and it happens to alienate some of the colonists. This will create a negative vibe between the British soldiers and the colonists. So with writs of assistance, let's make it very clear that this is a policy of the British. It's practically a search warrant, and it's going to create animosity and anxiety between the soldiers that have to enforce it and the colonists that have to endure it. So make sure you pay attention to that. Let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, I want you to underline or pay very close attention to the sugar and revenue tax. Remember, taxation is paramount throughout the American Revolution, or the reason why we have the American Revolution. It appears that the government, and when I say the government, the British government is taxing the colonies unfairly. They begin taxing the rich. And whenever you're in an economic downturn, the idea of taxing the wealthy seems the most obvious route to go, because you still need to generate revenue. You still have to pay the bills, but you cannot begin taxing the American, I should say, your middle class and your lower classes, because they're already struggling. You know, we can look at our current situation, right? And imagine, as everybody's dealing with the coronavirus, as we experience these massive layoffs, imagine if the government said, hey, yo, there's no tax relief. Taxes are still due. On top of that, we're now going to put an extra tax. Let's tax toilet paper. Let's tax, and let's say if they did tax toilet paper, right? And then maybe everybody would have access to it. Let's tax this, let's tax that. Yo, we're already struggling. We don't have time to be taxing all these other things. However, they begin to tax the wealthy because they feel like the wealthy they can handle it. And you know what? By and large, you tax the wealthy. If they're the 1%, 99% of America will not care. They're not going to shed a tear for the richest percent of Americans having to pay a little bit more, because we have to remember how the richest percent of those Americans got that money in the first place. As we're going through this economic recession, we're beginning to find out how much money people really have. And come to find out, guess what? It ain't real. Many of the richest people have, this net worth, but this net worth is predicated upon presumption and assumption, speculation within the market. Well, when the market isn't doing so well, guess what? These people really ain't got the money that you think they got. All this stuff is invented and inflated. And of course, we feel like the rich should be able to take care of the majority of it. So the sugar and revenue tax is important because it's affecting the rich. But you're never going to have a revolution if only the rich are taking the heat. So then we move on to something called the Stamp Act. And I would want you to underline the Stamp Act as you see it right here. Sorry about that. Underline, it's not as nice as I'd like it to be. So the Stamp Act is a tax. Despite the fact that it says it's an act, it's a law that will create a tax that will be applied to all paper goods. These type of taxes will affect everybody, because everybody uses a stamp to communicate. It would be just like you guys imagine having a tax on every text that you sent. That's going to affect everybody because we all communicate by way of text. So this is significant because we're now affecting every class. Low class, middle class, upper class, high class. It doesn't matter what type of class you got. Everybody's affected by this tax. And now everybody is going to be upset. Not just the rich, but the middle class, the lower class. And when everybody begins to get upset, that's when we really have a revolution. I got a lot of cats around here who are upset, like, oh my God, I can't get this, and I can't get that, and I can't get this, and Whole Foods is shutting down, and I can only go. And everybody's hoarding, and everybody's tripping. Yo, if you've been poor before, this is nothing new to you. We've been struggling. I don't refer to recessions as an economic downturn. Yo, I've been eating noodles. We eat eggs and meat. I mean, we're eating migas day to day because that's just how we grew up. This isn't struggling if it's what you consider your day to day. And so for many minority populations, the struggle has always been there. The idea that every other weekend, we don't know where the money's coming from, but somehow, some way, we got to get it. This is the reality for many Americans, and we're all being exposed to this reality. Some know how to cope because we've been exposed to it. And so we get into this conversation of exposure. When you're exposed to something, that creates resiliency. The idea of eliminating certain items or eliminating certain conversations or eliminating or canceling is what I should say. This notion of canceling things it reduces your exposure. And then when you reduce exposure, you don't know how to handle. And you are the ones that are out in the stores hoarding everything so that elderly individuals can't have access to this, and stocking up on this and stocking up on that. And now everybody's freaking out because we don't know how to handle. We do not know how to cope. So exposure is good. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean, hey, everybody go expose yourself to the coronavirus and then all of a sudden we're all going to be good because we're going to develop antibodies from it. What I'm getting at is the following. When all classes are affected, when all classes are exposed, then things become real. Then people begin to realize how everyone else has been living for quite some time. So the Stamp Act is significant because it is affecting all classes. And again, it's a tax. In response to the Stamp Act, the colonies are going to create something called the Stamp Act Congress. So we'll underline that. And this is an organization of 27 delegates from 9 colonies coming together. They're saying to themselves, listen, this is a problem. We got to address it. We still love being British, but this act has to go. And if you don't get rid of it, we're going to have to boycott English goods. So now they're also posing a threat. So you cannot simply say that I have a problem. If you say you have a problem with something, there's a tendency for somebody to hear it and be like, okay. At times, you have to light a fire underneath them so that they can act on it, to know that this is an emergency. In this particular case, the Stamp Act Congress is telling the British, you need to take care of this. And if you don't, there will be some economic consequences. And if you are aware of how the United States operates, when you begin affecting the wallet, then that's when people start paying attention. Turn on the news right now and focus on the coronavirus and notice all day, every day, they're talking about the stock market because it's messing up their money. Notice all day, every day, they're trying to inject money into Wall Street because it's affecting their money all day, every day. And they have yet, as what I noticed, have passed any type of legislation to provide assistance for those that are struggling, especially those that have been laid off immediately, with the sole exception of some items here and there regarding unemployment benefits and so forth. But there are many people that are out of work right now, struggling to trying to figure things out. And so when you see the economic side of things, you realize that in America, when you press the economics, then you begin to see change. Ultimately, with the Stamp Act Congress, they're going to see success. The British government, which is Parliament, will ultimately get rid of the Stamp Act. They realize, whoa, we overreached, we went too far, this is a mistake, and they get rid of it. But notice that they are pressured by London merchants and manufacturers, which means that when we told the businesses, hey, we're not buying your stuff no more, then the businesses went and told the government, hey, you need to take care of this stuff. So we begin to realize the influence of big business in our government. Corporations run the government. We like to think that our vote counts, and it does count, but we can affect change in a multitude of ways. It's not simply by way of the vote. It's not simply by way of the dollar. It's not simply by way of protest. It's not simply by way of taking action. It has to be a multitude of things. We can incorporate all of these items in order to exact change. And not everybody has to be on the forefront of economic change. Not everybody has to be on the forefront of political change. Yo, man, play your position. And a lot of people can get things done as long as we are all attacking the system in order to exact that change. That's exactly what took place with the Stamp Act Congress. That's exactly why it resulted in it being repealed. But then the British have to come back and assert their authority, almost like a bitter parent who, when they find out that their child has corrected them in some way, they have to reassert authority. So the British passed the Declaratory Act. And now Parliament possesses the power to pass laws for the colonies and the people. Now Parliament possesses that power, which means before that, who was possessing it? The colonies were. So the colonies have always been kind of on their own, operating with this benign neglect, if you will, which means that they were operating by themselves and having to deal with things by themselves. And so they don't need somebody over their shoulder. Yo, they've been operating in an isolated capacity. So this whole notion of, well, now we need to make sure you're doing this. We need to make sure you're doing that. That's because they need to feel a sense of necessity. I mean, by and large, like a lot of times you'll have a boss who really, your manager or your boss does nothing except watch over you. And when the boss of the boss begins saying, hey, what are you here for? Then they begin, well, I need to check on this worker. I need to check on that worker. And it turns into this process of, job perpetuation. What am I doing? Why am I necessary? And we're actually finding that out right now in this coronavirus. People are beginning to realize, do we really need Scott? Do we really need Josue? We're beginning to ask ourselves, do we need these individuals? And this will be some tough times. I'm telling y'all, moving forward, the idea, this whole notion of us moving to an online or integrated fashion, what companies are going to take from this is that, wow, we've had a company that had a building and it operated with 100 employees and it turned out these type of profits. We can downsize that, have these people work from home, 50 employees, and still stay within our profit margin. Let's do that. We reduce overhead. We have the people working from home. Oh, by the way, everybody working from home, guess what? All the electricity, all the energy that you guys are consuming at your house, who pays for that? You do. Just like I'm paying right now. Yo, TCC is shutting down all the campuses. Nobody's going there, and that's a cut, a way to cost. Now, don't get me wrong, they're still paying for a lot of the employees to do their job, but now we're doing our job at our house using our access of technology, electricity, and so forth in order to get things done. And there's no compensation for that or the extra training that we now have to endure in order to make it to the end. So everybody's on a new learning curve. And with the Declaratory Act, we realize that the British need to reaffirm their authority. Then the British passed what is known as the Townshend Act, which is right here. The Townshend Act is an act, but it's on imported goods. You see, they lost a lot of money from the Stamp Act. So now they have to figure out a new way to generate revenue, and that's what the Townshend Act. They're going to target poor cities, which are cities that make money based off of trade. The colonies are, wait a minute, if you're the only way we know how to make money is off it. So when you take away the trade, how do we make money? How are we going to pay the tax and so forth? So the colonies say, well, we're going to boycott. Why boycott? Because it worked the first. On top of the boycott, they begin to say, you know what? We're not buying their goods. We're going to make our own goods. And this is known as homespun clothing. Pay attention to home clothing because these are articles of fabric, textiles that colonies are now making for themselves. They're not the highest end. They're not the best end. But guess what? They're American made, which means that they produce American jobs and money stays in America. There's no diversion of that income. There's no diversion of those resources. Everything stays in-house. And that fits us. And when we look at people wearing the homespun clothing, not only is it demonstrating that, all along, we did not need the British. We could do for ourselves. The moment you step outside on your own and start doing for yourself, you begin to realize that a lot of people in your life are really trying to convince you that you need them, when in reality, at times you may not. You can do a lot of things by yourself. And we're now making our own thing. We're now producing our own industries, and it's benefiting the American people. It's benefiting the colonists, and we're developing a sense of economic independence. On top of that, we now have a symbol of the American resistance. If you see somebody wearing this clothes, you know they're down for the cause. So there are a lot of people that are going to benefit from this situation. Around 1770, we already have the British place. When I say the British officers, redcoats, soldiers, located in various parts of the colonies, and they're really just walking the street. I mean, you could make an argument that the American colonies were an occupied territory. And in port cities like Boston are dealing with the Townshend Act, with other excessive taxes. Tired of it. The Bostonians will begin to antagonize the officers. The officers are antagonizing the citizens. There could have been schools here and there, situations here and there, and then ultimately we find ourselves with a situation that could be considered being point. And this will be known as the Boston Massacre, which I want you guys to underline or be aware of. Now, the Boston Massacre involves groups killing 5 individuals. 5 individuals are going to be killed. 9 officers are going to be tried, but only 2 are found guilty. 2 are found guilty. This will be as a miscarriage of justice. Paul Revere will utilize this moment, again, printing off leaflets, pamphlets, if you will, to display all throughout the area. They're going to travel throughout the colony. People reading about the situation. You would get exposed to information by way of Twitter today. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Oh my God, I can't believe that they're breeding tigers in Oklahoma. Shout out to everybody that's watching Tiger King. You know, like we get exposed to information and people start to trip, and that's understandable. The Boston Massacre was used as a tool of propaganda in order to bring people into the movement. Like, look, guys, not only are we being taxed, not only are we being assaulted economically, we are being assaulted physically, and there's no justice in sight. So the Boston Massacre is seen as this moment, this tipping point to galvanize people from around the area, not just people that are directly affected. Because you could look at this and say, oh man, that's just only affecting Boston. But now you got a lot of people saying, no, it's affecting a lot of us, and we got to get involved. Then we have something called the Tea Act. The Tea Act will be a tax on tea. The Tea Act will lead to something known as the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party is just this moment in which you have people in Boston protesting in an illegal manner, because what these guys do is they ultimately destroy large amounts of tea, which is private property, and to the result of $4 million. I mean, if you destroyed $4 million worth of product today, I mean, those are some catastrophic situations. You could, you know, they could literally be like, hey, off with your head, or, you know, life in prison. But the Tea Act is a tax on tea. So they were taxing sugar. Now they're taxing tea. Everybody's drinking tea. That'd be like us taxing, you know, I don't know, water for the most part. But they're taxing tea, and the people of Boston are upset about it. They have the Boston Tea Party. They dump all the tea into the harbor, and the British come down on them heavy. And you have to, because it's $4 million worth of money. So after the Boston Tea Party, which is a result of the Tea Act, we have something that's called the Intolerable Acts. Now, I definitely want you to pay attention to the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were passed by the British, and it's not a tax, but they are laws or restrictions levied against the citizens of Boston. All ports are to be closed until all the tea is paid for. Listen, look, when you close the ports of a city, that'd be like closing the entertainment district of New Orleans. That's how they make their money. And if that's how they make their money, how are they going to make money to pay off the rest of the debt that they owe from that Boston Tea Party? So it's a messed up situation from the jump. They're taxing the wrong type of situation. Then, and on top of that, on top of the economic issue, they're affecting the political issue, saying that people of certain numbers cannot meet. So if you're going to have a town council, the town council must be observed and monitored by an informant of sorts, who can then report back to the mayor, and then report back to the governor to make sure that everything's copacetic, to make sure that nobody is colluding to do another act of um, you know, not violence, but an act of corruption, or at the very least, destroying of public property. And so with the Intolerable Acts, we are now, in essence, being monitored. We're being spied upon. They're affecting the economics. They're now affecting the politics. And this is of major concern. And so the colonies now have to figure out, well, if we can't meet in public without them monitoring us, then we got to start meeting in private. This leads us to our First Continental Congress. And I definitely want you to underline that. The First Continental Congress, we've already discussed before. This is an even greater alliance, a greater sense of unity between the colonies, because almost all the colonies are involved. All of the colonies wanted to be involved. It says here that GAMIA, that stands for Georgia Missing in Action. They weren't there. They weren't able to attend because of logistics. But at this Continental Congress, this is a secret meeting. And at this secret meeting, they ultimately discern that, look, we got to be united. We got to be together. And this is when you begin to see the unification of the colonies and the identification of Americans. They begin to say, we are Americans. Now, because Georgia wasn't able to attend the First Continental Congress, they said, let's have another one, later down the road. That way they can show up and then we can have absolute unity. But before that happens, British officials are informed. They receive information that there are colonists stockpiling weapons in various cities and locations. And when you find out that people are stockpiling something, it's because they're scared and they plan on using it. That's why people are stockpiling toilet paper and every other item known to man, because they're scared. And apparently they have bowel issues, so they need a lot of toilet paper. And what that lets the British officials know is that they need to go and check this out. Yo, when people are stockpiling weapons, it's probably because they plan on using them. So the British ultimately are going to be on a search. They're out in the cities of Concord and Lexington, and they're looking for these stockpiles. They kind of know where they might be, so they're going and looking for them. On their attempt to go and look for them, remember the redcoats, the British are wearing these gigantic red outfits. You can see them from a mile away. You have individuals that are going to, who are on the lookout to kind of let the people who are stockpiling weapons know these guys are trying to come take your stuff, and they're informing them. People like Paul Revere are going to jump on horses and they're going to ride throughout the town and say, the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming. And now these Minutemen are organizing. These are individuals that were trained to be ready within a minute's notice to deal with these type of redcoats. Ultimately, clashes are going to occur. 47 colonists are going to end up dead. 73 redcoats are going to end up dead. Let's be honest. If we had those type of numbers dead today in two cities, Arlington and Grand Prairie, 73 people dead trying to get toilet paper. 43 people from Arlington dead trying to get rice. That would be an issue. That'd be a major issue. It'd be all over the internet. It'd be all over the news. And so you got to know that Lexington and Concord, and I want you to be aware of that. Go ahead and underline it. Be aware of it. I think I've already had you guys do that. That these are issues that are going to lead to our American Revolution. Lexington and Concord are the first battles of our American Revolution. We are now in it. Now, what I want you to do now is underline the second CC, which stands for the Second Continental Congress. This is the second meeting. Everybody's in attendance, and this is after Lexington and Concord. So now they have to address that issue. We got people dying in the streets. Let's elect an individual to lead an army. Let's name that army the Continental Army. The leader of that army will be George Washington, as you guys can see right here. Whoa. And we're ready for war. We're going to raise money. We're going to raise an army. We're going to print money to pay for that army. And George Washington is the leader of that army. The British will respond by saying, oh, the colonies are in rebellion. We're going to squash this. They think it's just like a British issue for the most part. Not a British issue, a Bostonian issue. because that's where we see a lot of the problems taking place. Now, during the Second Continental Congress, we have a lot of people in attendance. One issue at hand, though, was that you had some people that say, no, 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 we can work this out with the British. And they were considering something that's called an olive branch petition. An olive branch is like a sign of peace, like an offering to say, hey, let's figure this out. It's weird because in one hand we have an olive branch, and in the other hand we have a pistol. And you can't operate in that capacity. One person who made it very clear that we couldn't operate in that capacity was Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine, and I want you guys to be aware of him. Go ahead and underline his name. Go ahead and underline this pamphlet he wrote, which is called Common Sense. The pamphlet will be circulated all throughout the colonies. Everybody's reading it. Everybody's astonished at the logic that he's presenting forth. And the logic is simply this. Yo, you can't have an island rule a continent. You can't have a king rule a people when we all believe ourselves to be created equal. This individual believes that he is not only ordained by God, but practically a descendant of God. He thinks that he's better than all of us. And God created all creatures on this earth to be equal, and that there should be no sense of superiority. We need to give power to the people. And so Thomas Paine is practically saying, listen, we got to have some common sense, and we got to know that the British are never going to look at us as equals. We got to be independent. So that's one. Common sense tells us we got to be independent. And we have to create a new type of government, which is known as a republic, which gives power back to the people. This isn't a new idea. We've had republics since Greek and Roman times. But if you looked at the world in that moment, 1776, if you will, most of the world was governed by righteous kings and queens on almost every continent. In the New World, because these were new times, Thomas Paine felt we needed a new government, and this new government should be a government of the people. So people are reading this and they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We do need government by the people. We do need leadership from every day that are dealing with the ins and outs of our society. Not these people living in ivory towers and castles that have no idea what people on the ground are dealing with. You go look in our government today and you could ask a politician, hey man, how much does a banana cost? They might tell you $1. Little do they know, from cats that are in Walmart day to day, you can get bananas 44 cents a pound. Right? So bananas aren't a pound. That means bananas are less than 44 cents. I mean, come on, man. It just goes to show these people are not in touch with the everyday realities of existence, of life. Like these cats just don't get it. Just like the notion of access to internet. You know, a lot of people are like, well, we're moving online. That's great. Yo, do you know that 25 to 30% of Americans don't have internet? They don't have it. They don't have access to it. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, no, well, that's not true, because I see young people with cell phones all day, and I see young people on TikTok all day. And yo, man, this is mad anecdotal. Go look up the numbers, and you'll see that there are a large there is a large percentage, and when I say large, I mean we're looking again 25 to 30% of individuals that just don't have access to internet. And so that could make it difficult to take care of these type of situations as we're moving forward. And if you're not aware of this now, I hope you all know that certain companies are providing free internet, like Charter, I believe Charter and Spectrum maybe, for 60 days. So that way we can get through this. So that way we can continue access to material. So that way we are a productive society moving forward. In this particular case, we have to know that power must flow from the people, that everyday Americans are aware of their reality and therefore should be in charge of their reality. Democracy is not on the table just yet. We are a republic, which means that representatives of our choosing will make decisions for us moving forward, and that we have to eliminate this notion of a monarchy. Go ahead and underline the Declaration of Independence. Whoa. And this simply is a document saying that we're letting everyone in the world know we're going to be free because we do not agree with monarchical rule. There are many people around the world that are under the thumb of monarchical rule, and if you're against that, yo, come join us. So this Declaration of Independence is universal. It's written by Thomas Jefferson, and it's universal in the sense that we can all understand this notion of not enjoying the extent of freedom. Not absolute freedom, but freedom in a society which is governed by society, not by a single ruler, not by a monarchy. When the American Revolution started, there were two camps. Now, the camps are on extreme ends of the spectrum. There are loyalists, these individuals that were in line with the kingdom, and man, on God, like logic would tell you, you should be with the government on this one because they have all the resources. On the opposite end of the spectrum are patriots. These are the rebels. These are guys that are willing to go and fight and die in the streets in order to get things done. And then there are a bunch of people in the middle. People that are just like, man, I'm trying to buy toilet paper. I'm trying to eat eggs. I'm trying to not lose my mind while staying in the house. And that's the bulk of society at large. 80% of society, you could make an argument that a lot of Americans are not really aware of the ins and outs of the fight. There are loyalists and there are revolutionaries. There are loyalists and there are patriots. And these are the ones that are ultimately out there in the trenches fighting so that we can have something a bit better. In the beginning of the war, the British are going to set up shop in New York because they do not want to address the threat directly because that's the Hornet's Nest. The Hornet's Nest is in New England, in Boston to be exact. So when the British arrive in New York, the Continental Army under the leadership of George Washington will meet up with them. Like, okay, you're in our backyard. We got to come get you. So George Washington goes up to New York and he doesn't win. And then he engages in another battle and doesn't win. In the beginning of the American Revolution, the Patriots are losing. And the British are taking this as, well, that's to be expected because we're better than them. These are a bunch of ragtag nobodies. I think that they're somebody. So we're going to spank them and we're just going to rest on our laurels. We're going to just relax. And this is that brings us to this issue right here. General William Howe does not pursue Washington. We allow the Patriots to kind of regroup, reform, re-energize to fight another day. And this will prove to be problematic. Eventually, we end up with the battle called Saratoga. And you gotta, this is major. Saratoga is crazy major because this isn't like the third battle or fourth battle, but it's a battle that takes place in which the American Patriots win. And with this victory, we're able to prove to many people, not only within the colonies, to join the ranks and reinforce this revolution, but to prove to people around the world, yo, American revolutionaries are no joke. I mean, we can take care of ourselves when we have to. So the Battle of Saratoga is significant because it shows that Americans can fight, Americans can win with no assistance. But then the French come back and they say, hey, yo, America, we got you. From here on out, we're going to support you. Now, the French are willing to support the Americans because the French always have a bone to pick with the British. And take this back into world history. And let's take it back to the French and Indian War. Let's take it back to the 7 Years' War. The French have a bone to pick with the British. So the Battle of Saratoga is crazy significant because we've now gained the support of European empire, which was French. When the French jump on board, then England has to respond and says, okay, so you want to support the Americans, and then war with you. So in 1778, England is now fighting France on top of fighting us. The very next year, England is now fighting Spain, Holland. So England's fighting 1, 2, 3, 4 different entities. 3 of those entities are within Europe. So when we look at the colonial concern, it becomes a secondary issue because of proximity. Yo, you got to deal with your most immediate threat, and the colonies just aren't that. When we look at this slide here with Southern hospitality, I bring this up because a lot of times the American Revolution is relegated to this notion that, well, the New England colonies were taking care of everything. No, that's not true. Every colony was involved in some capacity. You can see here that as American riflemen were picking off British at Kings Mountain and Cataspins. That should let you know that we were engaged in guerrilla warfare. We were killing people as south as the Carolinas. We could argue Florida. I'm not Florida. I mean, we're making the most of every colony we can have access to in order to fight this conflict. The conflict is everywhere. Now, I want you to be aware of Yorktown simply because this is the last battle of the American Revolution. You know, the French are assisting the English are fighting the French, the Spanish, and Holland in Europe. They're also fighting us in the colonies. I mean, they're spread too thin. We're fighting them with the assistance of the French, with Washington at lead. We're able to secure a victory in town. And this will be the last major battle of the American Revolution. And this will end the American Revolution. And George Washington proves to be an effective leader, not because of the amount of victories he had, but because his ability to maintain consistency and continuity throughout the conflict. Did he? Yeah. You know what? A lot of cats take L's. You get your life and you consider even academic endeavors, and you're like, yo, I just got a 23 on my exam. That's your L. That's what you deserved. Any times people get that they don't deserve. But it's not an issue of what's not deserved. It's not an issue of what happens and what doesn't happen. How do you respond to the situations that you're being affected by? What is your hustle moving forward? You know, when there is a hiccup, when there is a roadblock, when there is a bump in the road, what is your response system? And for George Washington, his response system was consistent. He was a leader. And that leadership, good or bad, enabled us to win this American Revolution. His leadership entailed keeping the cause alive, keeping the army in the field, and keeping the states together. And you can read that and be like, oh, well, you know, that doesn't take much. No, it takes a lot. You know, convincing people is not easy. You can convince 3, you can convince 4. I know you guys may have followers up to the thousands. That's nothing. We're talking about, you know, and convincing followers on top of all that. That's just simply convincing somebody to say, hey, can you like my page? Hey, can you follow my page? Hey, can you? That's a big difference between, hey, can you pick up a weapon and come and fight with me real quick? Because a lot of cats probably wouldn't. So George Washington is a significant figure in the American Revolution. You probably should pay attention to that, underline it. George Washington, commander of the Continental Army. His leadership enables us to be victorious, leading to what is known as the Treaty of Paris of 1783. This treaty will formalize the end of the American Revolution. This treaty will force the British to recognize the independence of these United States in America, and we are now an independent nation, 1783. And that's practically all you need to know. That will end this particular update and recording. I hope this all finds you well. Other than that, I'll see you next time.